All right, BizzleCast listeners, thank you for joining me for the BizzleCast vlog entry 002. It was not supposed to go past 001, but I got so much feedback that, well, 002 was inevitable. I'm going to jump into about a dozen awesome sci-fi properties, mostly movies, but a couple TV shows and other things that I've never talked about on the BizzleCast in almost 2 years of broadcasting or mentioned offhand, not really discussed. And this is in response to people talking about, well, you bash on Westworld, but, what else is on TV other than a couple so-so shows on Sci-Fi? So here's stuff from the last 15, 20 years, which if you've not seen, you must check out. I have tons of props. I'm very excited. I went through 2 whole ink cartridges or 3 on my printer because I don't feel like putting the graphics in this time, but maybe in the near future. I kind of liked having the physical props and all my DVDs and Blu-rays and so forth. And so I'm about to get started. I want to thank everyone for their feedback from the first one where I said I would probably never do it again, and here I am. About 10% of the feedback was like, great job, Bizzle, you did awesome. And the rest was, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why do you not like these shows? And I'm glad that people are listening and watching my posts. I do consider myself, a bit of a culture maven, but I do admit all my biases, especially against, television in general, me being a movie guy. It's nothing personal. It's funny, you think that podcasters, once you're done with a podcast, with actors, they say, well, don't watch the movie or maybe watch it once and then you move on. But the thing is, when you're starting to get good at something, let me rephrase this. When you're trying to get good at something, no matter how many times you do it, you actually need to listen to yourself to get better. And it might seem egotistical, but the bottom line is the best podcasters out there, including myself, listen to our podcast not once, but multiple times. And sometimes, right after you release it, and then sometimes a month later, and sometimes a year later to see how far you've come, what things you need to work on, maybe some gold from the past that you now, can bring into the present. It's just like any other kind of muscle that you're stretching. And part of why I think I've avoided video blogs is that it took a while for me to get used to my voice on the podcast. But once I did, I don't even think about it anymore. So seeing myself is kind of weird, but to be honest with you, it's not as weird as I thought it would be, especially with the low lighting in my sort of hippie basement here, with my mug of not tea and water bottle, my phone, which is charging because I go through 3 batteries a day, headphones, all sorts of props. I'm going to be doing a board games podcast soon. Battle Lore, 2nd edition. This shit is the bomb. Video games, can't do it anymore, except, like Call of Duty and a few other games. I will get back to that, actually, but I love the social aspect of, hanging out with people and things like this. Okay, enough of that. So, thank you for listening. I'm calling this the 10 plus 2 countdown because I've got 10 primary sci-fi properties I just want to talk about. It has come to my attention, and this is looping back to listening to yourself over and over and over again. It has come to attention from myself that I tend to lean on, 6 to 10 sci-fi or fantasy properties, pretty regularly when bashing other ones, which are less good. We've got, Battlestar Galactica. I mean, come on. Trisha Helfer as a Cylon. Come on. Got to see that show. Got anything Joss Whedon, even Avengers Age of Ultron, which personally I fucking love and have seen a million times. I think it's almost as good as the first Avengers. And of course, Firefly, which I talked about in the first vlog. This is the original and the only great Western sci-fi that's ever been made. Sorry, Westworld. If you get better, I will jump on board. And of course, you all know my obsession with The Matrix, but it's not my obsession with The Matrix that bothers people. The same way people respect me for liking Joss Whedon for Firefly, Serenity, and Avengers 1, question, my sanity for defending him on Avengers 2 or Dollhouse, which I actually hated, but I defend him on it because I think Fox is bullshit. Speaking of Warner Brothers, I love The Matrix Reloaded. I'll never defend Revolutions. Reloaded, love it. That's for a commentary from way back in the day you can listen to. Otherwise, we will be talking about something related to this. There's a lot of weird Kevin Bacon-ish stuff going on as I put this list together. And then there's, of course, sci-fi movies that no one in their right mind would watch, let alone like, which is Terminator Genesis. This is a fucking amazing action movie. I don't care what anybody says. I was almost offended philosophically as a Terminator fan until I realized I was never really a Terminator fan, nor was I ever particularly philosophically into it until, you gotta wait one more minute. Ghost in the Shell. I'm going to do a whole podcast on this with my buddy Adam Tuck, who got me into this. This is the original movie remastered. There's 3 movies and 3 seasons, all of which are very, very different. The only 2 that have any continuity are the first 2 seasons of the TV series. Otherwise, it's lots of different visions of sort of the multiverse of Ghost in the Shell. But what's great about it is not just its art or writing, but it's, philosophically things like cyberpunk, William Gibson's Neuromancer, Snow Crash, and so forth. All these things come from Japan, and Ghost in the Shell is the perfect sort of titration of all this. Now, a couple movies which I'm not going to mention just because they're classics and you should see include Blade Runner. Now, while this is super cool right here, because this is the 20th anniversary collector's edition. I don't know if you can see that. Wait, hold on. There we go. Or 30th? 30th, sorry, of course, 30th. Wow, I'm fucking old. So you have all the different versions. There's like 5 versions. The main 2 that are debated are the final cut and the director's cut. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. It's got some great artwork inside and so forth. Tons of discs. And for some reason, the bizarre unicorn is what made it on the cover. Now, if you're a Jessica Jones fan with the white horse, the unicorn is certainly an interesting image that has been used throughout sci-fi across the years, and I'm definitely not going to force you guys to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is so bizarre. I'll only say 2 things. One, the book is like 200 pages by Arthur C. Clarke, who also wrote the movie, and is one of the great sci-fi books of all time. You could read it in literally one day of traveling. And the other is Pink Floyd, you might not know, was going to be brought on board to do the last 25 minutes when he's just floating in space and all sorts of weird shit is happening. Spoiler alert. Pink Floyd was going to do the final 25 minutes of composition, if not the entire soundtrack. That is what Kubrick wanted. The studio did not want that, and Pink Floyd ended up releasing that track on their album Metal on the final track called Echoes, which, unlike the Dark Side of the Moon thing, which I've tried to do with The Wizard of Oz a million times, this actually lines up, and this meant to line up. But the end of this movie and the Pink Floyd track Echoes, blah, 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 blah. Star Wars, we'll have to get back to another day. Yep, this is the visual dictionary. I got this on sale for about $3. It is important as a podcaster talking about Star Wars. I know I'm a nerd. So what's great about being a podcaster, you find reasons to do shit like this. So, okay, here we go. Thank you for joining me. I hope you made it this far. I've been trying to keep these ones shorter, so I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible. So here we go. All right, so top 10 plus 2 sci-fi properties, which the Bizzle has talked not all about or very little about. I'm going to start with 2 television shows. Then I'm going to mention, 8 movies, and then I have 2 non-traditional properties at the end that I'm going to add on. So it's not just BSG, Orphan Black, Firefly. Nope, this is new stuff, or stuff I've only mentioned. Now, the first one I have actually mentioned with my buddy Sivan in BizzleCast 10, which I don't think anyone has heard in a long time, where we do talk about the philosophy of the Terminator movies, and that is the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I'm sorry, Terminator: the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Now, there's a lot of interesting things about this. The first is prop, Lena Headey. Wow, who does that look like? Queen Cersei. Guess what? Unlike Cersei, she's good and badass. She takes all the best qualities of Linda Hamilton, and because she gets to do it over a whole series and with, sort of 25 years of movie history behind her, is to me the definitive Sarah Connor, not just as a fighter, but as a real mother that you buy. And the reason you buy her as a mother is because finally we get a cool John Connor. Now, I know this picture of Thomas Dekker is not ideal, but I can tell you, he, as a 16-year-old, perfectly balances or I should say brings in just enough whininess for there to be continuity with the young actor who shall not be named from Terminator 2, who ruined that movie, almost for me. But you totally buy, especially after season 1 when they cut his hair and he gets some more balls, I guess literally and figuratively, becomes actually a leader. I mean, he starts leading his mother played by Lena Headey. Brian Austin Green from 90210 is amazing as Derek Reese, who's Kyle Reese, his biological dad's brother from the future, so his uncle. And the most important reason, Summer Glau gave us this fucking amazing picture. Summer Glau, Firefly, who you could see potential in the series. In the last couple episodes, they really start making use of her. And then when they made the Serenity movie, the Firefly movie called Serenity, they just went all out. And they decided it was going to be about Captain Malcolm Reynolds, Mal, which we knew, and played by Nathan Fillion. But she's really the center of the story and the second lead character. Oh, shit, I'm not supposed to talk about Firefly. Fuck. All right, so I got props all over the place. Okay, so here we go. Look at this image. Amazing. She plays a reprogrammed good Terminator sent from the future. Essentially, the show takes place following the events of Terminator 2. They conveniently ignore all following movies, which is totally fine. And it turns out that they didn't stop Judgment Day in Terminator 2. They just pushed it back. And then they think they're safe. And then another Terminator comes back when he's like 16 and 99. And they have to jump to the future. And Summer Glau plays Cameron, who's a reprogrammed Terminator sent by future John Connor to the past, just like Arnold reprogrammed sent to the past in Terminator 2, but she's a way better actress and way cooler. And again, over 31 episodes in 2 seasons, sadly only, but still a great 31. It really gets under your skin in a good way, where there are times when you're not sure if she's going to flip, but you're certainly rooting for her not to flip. By the way, I apologize for this weird-looking, weird-shaped microphone. I swear it doesn't look as bizarre in real life. This is a Rode Podcaster mic, so shout out to Rode. It's not cheap, but I've recently talked to some people who want to get into podcasting, so please feel free to hit me up, and I can talk to you about hardware and software and so forth. Okay, so that's one show. I said there were two. What's the second one? Second show, and don't laugh, because I did at first when I heard this. Just like I laughed with Sarah Connor because Terminator is mostly corny, and just like I laughed with Battlestar Galactica and, almost missed Battlestar. I can't even believe it changed my life from, a watcher standpoint because of the name and because of the corny history, is SGU, Stargate Universe. Okay? Now, if you're around my age, which is 35, if you grew up in your adolescence in the early 90s, you wouldn't know it by watching that, but at the time in 1994, the Stargate movie with Kurt Russell and James, what's his name? That went on to be on The Office and played Ultron's voice and so forth. Anyways, Stargate was such a cool concept, and while it completely othered Middle Eastern people, and a really stereotypical portrayal, although they were the good guys and the fake gods who were dressed as Egyptian gods on the other side of the universe, who were not Middle Eastern, were bad guys. So if you look beneath it, it's not as racist as it seems, but just the portrayal is ridiculous. But the idea of us with our current military technology, but being able to go, galaxy jumping or even universe jumping with stargates, these ancient things, put by some, ancient creatures, aliens, beings so far ago and so powerful that we could never imagine. I mean, this is a major trope of science fiction, but visually and aesthetically, they nailed it. And who can forget, of course, spoiler, the sending of the nuke up the holographic transporter thing and blowing up the gods was amazing. Anyways, Stargate Universe was the third of 3 Stargate shows that they tried to spin off of it. In 1997, Brad Wright and Jonathan Glasser created a show called SG-1, Stargate SG-1, and followed a few years later by Stargate Atlantis, which are horribly, horribly campy and low-budget shows, but had decent writing and some lovable actors. I could never get into it. It was far too campy and cheesy for me, but I continued to love the aesthetic of the Stargate itself. And so when I heard that they were retooling the third iteration of the show into something a little more Battlestar-y, it caught my attention. It was going to be darker. It was going to be less cheesy. It wasn't just going to be let's throw as many aliens and alien worlds at you as possible. Sorry, James Spader from before. I apologize. I love James Spader. He was, I thought, great as Ultron and among many roles. But anyways, SGU, like Sarah Connor, only lasted 2 seasons. It did get a full 2 seasons, so you get 40 episodes, which is absolutely perfect. I think it could have used a 3rd or 4th and still been great, but they had a fantastic ensemble cast, and it was actually in some ways the opposite of Battlestar. So Battlestar was humans, not from Earth, on the other side of the universe or galaxy, fleeing towards Earth away from the machines that they created. Stargate Universe takes place in the current day and is humans who are investigating a planet, and they need to flee, and so they go blindly through some Stargate. They don't know where it's going to go, and they end up billions and billions of light years away, essentially on the other side of the universe, in an old, ancient, giant ship that they call Destiny. And it sort of combines them wanting to get back to Earth and investigating, the far parts of the universe. But what's great is it's not just those two things. It's that the 2 lead characters, Louis Ferreira, who plays the sort of Commander Adama role, the sort of, although even significantly more flawed than Eddie Olmos as Adama in Battlestar. Ferreira plays a tormented, older, but still in great shape, an excellent leader when his head's on straight, which isn't always, and when he's not drinking, which isn't always. And then you got Robert Carlyle, phenomenal British actor who plays the scientist who kind of tricked them into going. I mean, he didn't cause the problem that forced them to evacuate, but he did evacuate them to the furthest locale possible, and not some nearby planet where they could just be scooped up. And so that's actually the tension. The entire series is between getting home and discovering what Destiny's mission is, because they can't even fly the goddamn thing for like half the show, which is also a really cool aspect of it. So there's this really, Arthur C. Clarkean aspect to Stargate Universe, where you want them to get home, but you start siding with the science side of it, where you're like, well, we're out here, we might as well figure out what the fuck is going on. And then you realize that maybe the best way home is to combine both, and that the science is going to create the return. A lot of unknown actors who I'm not sure where they've gone. They're character actors, small players here and there. If you watch the trailer, the chubby science nerd Eli, who's supposed to be a teenager, playing a video game program, and doesn't know that the video game program is actually a test, so they can find the most brilliant mind in the world to decode these things. He passes it by beating the game. His computer shuts down. Immediately, Richard D. Anderson, who's now like general, I guess, shows up. He's played the Kurt Russell role through all the Stargate shows, and they said, Eli Wallace, you need to come with us, and David Blue, who plays Eli, says, well, what if I say no? And then Richard Dean Anderson completely dryly says, well, I'm going to beam you up to our ship then. Eli laughs, closes the door, starts walking up the stairs, beamed onto the spaceship looking at Earth, and they just launch from there. Very fun show, really well written. Some excellent cast members. I'm not really sure where they were going. One in particular to look for is a fellow named Jameel Walker Smith, who plays a very, very angry and disturbed and easily agitated sergeant, but he's extremely loyal to his commanding officers, to the point of killing other people on the crew who he thinks are threatening them. And it just has some amazing emotional performances. Ming-Na Wen, now I guess she's going by, who's known of everything from currently Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the voice of Mulan. I mean, she's been in a million stuff over the years. And Robert Carlyle and Louis Ferreira. Brian J. Smith, who was in Sense8, a Wachowski property. I'm not going to talk about that today. So that's Stargate Universe, which brings us to the first movie and number 8 on the countdown, which is... Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention. Sarah Connor Chronicles. Shirley Manson, she's a Terminator and the head of a major AI corporation. If you don't know who Shirley Manson is and you grew up in the 90s, then shame on you. Wiki that immediately. Garbage is the shit. Okay, 2006. After Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions, I'm going to start looking at the mic, were roundly panned. Their first assistant director, James McTeague, based on a script that they put together from the extremely famous 1998 DC Vertigo graphic novel by Alan Moore and David Lloyd, V for Vendetta. Boom. The Wachowskis have talked from the beginning about how influenced they are by anime and comic books. We're going to return to this much later. This movie did okay at the time. people criticized it of being too post 9/11-y, but if you watch it now, it's actually post 9/11 and pretty prescient, in the sense of if the terrorist stuff that goes on feels more like the terrorist stuff going on now than at the time when it was made in like 2005, in the middle, or the heart, I should say, of the first phase of the Iraq War and the continued battle in Afghanistan and suicide bombings and so forth. This is one where the terrorist is the good guy, but because, hold on, let me find some props. This is their motto. I think, without pointing fingers at a certain political party in America, I think we know where this is going. Strength through unity, unity through faith. Now, it should be noted that is, I would say Hugh Jackman. Hugo Weaving plays behind the mask the entire movie, and just with his voice and moving his body around is really amazing. So this is him taking down that particular message, and he is an anti-hero in some ways, even though he seems just like Robin Hood in the beginning. It's a dystopian political thriller, and it's set in the UK. And there's really good reasons, even if it's an American movie, to set this stuff in the UK. It's a neo-fascist regime. Hugo Weaving plays V, an anarchist freedom fighter who attempts to ignite a revolution through elaborate terrorist acts. And Natalie Portman, badass. Oh yeah. Oh man, this is her like saying fuck you to George Lucas of the prequels. I can be a badass. Fuck Queen Amidala. She is awesome in this as Evie. And their relationship is one of the great Hollywood relationships ever, especially because he's behind a mask the whole time, and she trusts him innately. This movie is one of those 1984 type movies where it could have been 50 years ago, it could be 50 years from now, it could be the present, near past, near future, always works. And even though you kind of know from the beginning, because they telegraph you specifically what his goal is to 1 year later to blow up Parliament. So you're like, okay, what's going to go on during this year? And that's what makes it great, is you stop worrying about what the ending is going to be like. You're going to wonder how they get there. And this is another example of that. 2002, Steven Soderbergh, a fantastic director of Traffic and a million other movies. And I think arguably the most underrated George Clooney performance, Solaris, based on a Russian movie, which was based on a Russian book. And Soderbergh and the writers actually say that they tried to base it more on the original book than on the Russian movie. The Russian movie is very worth watching itself. I mean, for 1972, it's quite ahead of time. But if anyone has seen, breakthrough Russian film movies, like Man with a Movie Camera, they were able to transcend the stifled environment that they were in to make incredible movies at times. But, what's great about Solaris is you can literally describe it in two sentences. He's a psychologist. His wife has died. We don't find out later to why. He shows up on the space station where they had lost touch. Everyone's acting totally crazy. And then his long dead wife shows up all of a sudden and wants to be all kissy, kissy, lovey with him. He doesn't know what the fuck's going on, what other people are seeing and experiencing. And it's really a psychological journey. I mean, once he takes off that space helmet, it's really just like a sort of a psychological thriller with some horror aspects. Great watch, not too long, definitely check it out, but it cannot hold a candle to, and some of you might think this is kind of a cheap one, but I can't believe I've never talked about this. I think I mentioned once in one podcast I'd be horrified to do a commentary for this, which is, really quickly about Solaris, Natasha McElhone, who I can never pronounce her name, McElhone or McElhone, is a fantastic actress who's much older than you'd think, beautiful, and her and Clooney have great chemistry. And I wanted to make sure to get that because she's coming back at one point. And just sear this image into your brain. Okay, when you see this in the movie, this is not a good sign. All right, we're halfway there. Donnie fucking Darko. This is the scariest movie that I have personally seen multiple times. I hate horror movies. If I'm forced to watch one, I'll avert my eyes. But this movie is so good and funny and dark, all at the same time, all wrapped into one. And it still scares me. Who's this, you ask? Well, those who are friends of the Bizzle know that my middle name is Frank, and his name is Frank, and he is a giant bunny rabbit. And the IMDb description is literally, a troubled teenager is plagued by visions of a large bunny rabbit that manipulates him to commit a series of crimes after narrowly escaping a bizarre accident. Large bunny rabbit, you say? Jake G's not happy. He's hitting some sort of wall there. It gets really scary with the sound design. And maybe the coolest girlfriend of all, Jenna Malone. Hello, Jenna Malone. Why am I mentioning you? I'm mentioning you because you're awesome. And this is a horrible printout because I started running out of ink. But that bunny rabbit is as horrifying and as hilarious as he appears to be. And just in case you didn't get enough of that. God, I'm scared just talking about it. I'm going to keep going because the world's ending in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 12 seconds starting now. All right, so I mentioned that sometimes the dystopian movies are cooler to do in the UK or England in particular, and just more conducive because it's advanced in one of the most advanced nations in the world, but it's not that big and it's completely surrounded by water. So you can have them, walled off in a future scenario where illegal immigrants from everywhere around the world who are dying from disease and other horrific things are not able to get into the country. And that is, in fact, the setting or milieu. Sorry, that was a mosquito. I don't know where that came from. And, hold on. Oh, here's the Donnie Darko DVD. Boom. Clive Owen. The best and only great Clive Owen movie I've ever seen, and he absolutely destroys it. It's based on P.D. James's 1992, the same name, Children of Men. Takes place in 2027, which is where I was setting my sci-fi book for a while. I'm like, no, maybe I'll change the date. But humans have been infertile for almost 20 years, and it's causing people to act even more horrific because they can't see a future. They think it's all over. People are either committing violence or taking pills or drinking themselves to death and so forth. And the illegal immigrants that are trying to get in are shoved in refugee camps that are like the worst of Gaza or the West Bank, and even more horrific than that. Clive Owen's character, who used to be married to Julianne Moore's character, finds out that she, and they actually broke up because their son didn't survive because of not just infertility, but just kids that are born, are stillborn or die in childbirth and so forth. And she's part of a resistance movement, which isn't what it seems. And he comes across a pregnant girl, a young, 16-year-old African pregnant girl, refugee, and they got to get her out because she's the last best hope for humankind. It's all about the film. I actually tried to do a BizzleCast commentary for Children of Men, but it's so visceral. It's all about the experience. It's really bloody. It pioneered. I should have led with this. Directed by Alfonso Cuarón of Gravity fame, and him and his buddy Inarritu, who won for The Revenant and Birdman the last few years. The three of them, their cinematographer, whose name I don't have in front of me, who's also Mexican. They're all Mexican. Pioneered new levels of one-shots, as they call them, as one-ers of one-ers. And, there are action scenes that I don't think even Mad Max has replicated, just in terms of how much action you get into a single shot before you truly change the camera. Now they have, tricks, you put it behind someone's back, but in that they've got, a couple action scenes which last minutes and minutes and minutes with shit blowing up and tanks and guns on a small budget. I have no idea how they do it. One of my favorite movies ever. I saw that with my good friend Lulu, and I don't know if she's listening to this, but we always end up seeing, even though we only see each other once a year, or we usually try to see a movie, and it's always dark and disturbing and amazing, and this was no exception. Okay, we're on the home stretch. So I finally was able to work in a Star Trek movie here that wasn't one of the new reboots, because this is really one of my favorite science fiction movies ever. And if you didn't like Star Trek, you don't like Star Trek The Next Generation, you might not be able to get totally into it. That movie... Here it comes. First Contact. Resistance is futile. So you can see there the Borg. The Borg are the coolest, most interesting, and most politically and sociological relevant alien ever created in the Star Trek universe, because it speaks directly to physical and mental modification of human bodies and minds, things that like cyberpunk and anime and so forth have been dealing with for a while, and that we're going to have to deal with, like metahumans and transhumans and so forth. So you bring in the best bad guy. It also harkens back to the, coolest Next Generation, multi-episode arc, which is what turned it into a good show, where Captain Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, gets abducted by the Borg and becomes a leader, Locutus of Borg. Well, why did they capture him? Well, he's the captain of the lead flagship of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, and so he can offer them all sorts of keys to penetrating their defenses, and the movie just jumps right into it, and where the Borg are attacking and they're able to stop, but one Borg ship gets away and goes into the past, and they find that the Borg's taken over the entire planet of Earth to stop them from ever. This is a John Connor scenario. They're going back to stop Picard's and the Enterprise's ancestors from ever being born, so they couldn't stop the Borg, whatever. And it turns out that the Borg are trying to kill a guy who's huge in the mythos of Star Trek, Zefram Cochrane, who invented the warp engine, not just after World War III or World War IV, but like during when the war was going on, and it created first contact with the Vulcans, which I don't think it was a retcon that the Vulcans were the first ones to come to Earth, and that caused peace and unity and socialism and so forth on the planet. And so you've got one story in the planet, which is a really cute humanistic story about the hero worship that all the Star Trek Next Gen characters have for Zefram Cochrane. And he's just like a drunk asshole who doesn't have any clue how important it is. And they're actually causing it to maybe not happen by, being overly hero worshipful of him. And then on the fucking Enterprise, you got Worf, Data, and Picard, Captain Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, just going to town on fucking Borg, and it's just a great balance of Star Trek in action, and this pretty much sums it up. Creepy Borg lady, absolutely fantastic. You never really thought that there was a sort of a semi-human or individualized personality behind it. They worked it in perfectly. And, again, after Patrick Stewart, the secondary lead is Brent Spiner as Data, but you'd have to watch Star Trek Next Generation to find out why that is the case. All right, here we go. 3 more and then a couple specials. So the next couple are ones that I think you guys have probably seen. And if you haven't, you might have heard about them and it's kind of old, so I'm not going to see it. Actually, really the final 3. I'm going to run through them real quick. First one I watched recently thinking it would not hold up, and it has held up incredibly well. In fact, continues to be more and more prescient. And that is The Truman Show, starring Jim Carrey. One of the most simple premises ever. And even though each step of the screenplay and the movement of the characters and decisions of the characters and what he thinks you can sort of see coming is implemented so well, that doesn't even matter. He is living in a simulated television show, right? Now this doesn't seem like such a big thing. Now the difference is, and the reason this is prescient, and we still haven't hit this yet as far as I know, is that it's involuntary. He was raised as a baby by a corporation to star in this show from birth until death, and people will watch the Truman Channel around the clock, which is totally like watching reality TV channel around the clock. But this is one guy who doesn't know about it. It will be interesting to know. It's been analyzed in terms of its themes of simulated reality, existentialism, reality TV, even religious themes. Absolutely spectacular performance by Truman, a.k.a. Jim Carrey. It manages to be funny and dark at the same time. And Natasha McElroy is not only in The Truman Show, she's the one from Solaris with George Clooney, but she kind of sneaks on as a semi-extra or a side character just to try and sabotage it and tell him the truth. And so she ends up being like the guardian angel, even though he doesn't understand completely what she's saying. So there is a little Kevin Bacon going on. And before we continue the Sci-Fi Kevin Bacon game, shout out to Sly Fox Breweries, one of Pennsylvania's many amazing breweries, support your local industries, people. All right, here we go. Oh, by the way, here's Truman. And this is an epic scene. I don't know if you can see it. This is not black and white in the movie. Here we go. Where he finds the edge of the known universe after they try and drown him, basically, to stop him from finding the truth. Natasha McElroy. The second one is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And this is a movie that you either love or you hate, or you haven't seen because you've heard that everyone loves or hates it. But this is considered by many critics, and most critics that I trust, as one of the greatest films of this century, and certainly one of the greatest films of my lifetime. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, and Kate Winslet was nominated for Best Actress. Jim Carrey should have been nominated for Best Actor. The Jim Carrey connection. Here we go. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, giving us, images like this on the ice, where a couple undergoes a procedure to have each other erased from their own memories. And this is, as being a Michel Gondry movie, he's sort of in the Charlie Kaufman, Spike Jonze, Neo, surrealist movement, or whatever you want to call it. Her being John Malkovich, these sorts of things. But it's really all about memory and love and relationships, and human interaction, and making it funny and dark. But their relationship turns bad. It's so bad, and they're so emotionally. And this is, by the way, I think a direct line to Her, at least with Joaquin Phoenix's character, which is that Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet's characters are so emotionally vulnerable and disturbed that they literally have to get the memories wiped out, or they're going to go crazy. And then they start kind of smelling and sensing the memories in weird ways. And it's got a great supporting cast. You can IMDb it online, including Mark Ruffalo and Elijah Wood and Kirsten Dunst and a bunch of other characters. But amazingly, it made $70 million worldwide in 2004 on like a bizarre rated R indie movie. But it gave us images like this. And the bed on the beach, my personal favorite. God, how amazing is this to wake up with your true love on the beach. So here we go. We're down to number 1. And that is, wait for it, Contact. I don't have the DVD, but if I did, that's what it would look like, minus the printer lines. Contact is a highly underrated science fiction property. In fact, so much so, and I like it so much so, that I did a commentary for it. We'll hopefully release it soon in the near future, but this is Jodie Foster, in my opinion, at her best. And while this is early Matthew McConaughey, he is excellent. And they have ridiculous romantic chemistry that you would never think was possible or could happen between those two. She does seem a little bit older than him, but I think partially that's just because Jodie Foster's been around forever. They were both in there. I think she was in her mid-30s and he was like in his late 20s, early 30s in the movies. But it seems like, he's interested in an older woman, which actually works really well. Her being a scientist and super confident, powerful, but also vulnerable, has an incredible supporting cast, as you'd expect a movie by Forrest Gump's Robert Zemeckis, 1997, including James Woods, Tom Skerritt, William Fichtner, one of my favorites, who plays a blind guy with amazing ears to hear the signal, John Hurt, his incredible turn in this, Angela Bassett, who plays Chief of Staff, with Bill Clinton, who pops up throughout the movie. This is the Zemeckis Forrest Gump thing where he finds like real world footage and sticks it in. And Jake Busey, a son of, who plays the horrible, evil, religious fundamentalist terrorist in 1997, and David Morse, who plays her father. So bravo. We get to see Jodie Foster looking awesome and being awesome like this. And with her awesome hearing and scientific skills like this. Now, Jodie Foster has that exact precise way of talking that makes her the perfect scientist. I mean, it's this I think was maybe one of her best 3 roles ever, post, her being a child and teenage actor in Scorsese movies and so forth. Like, in terms of a Jodie Foster movie, I don't know what I've seen that's better. She's perfect in it. And man, Look at that dreamboat. Look at him. He was a hot young actor then. He's a hot middle-aged actor now. Matthew McConaughey can do no wrong. So, thank you for making it this far. This was longer than I wanted it to be, so I'm going to wrap it up. So, really quickly, a couple extras here, and I will sign out on entry 002. I said, non-traditional media. One is The Last of Us. Now, I have a PlayStation 3. I've spent some time playing video games. I wouldn't consider myself a hardcore video gamer. I definitely was a hardcore computer gamer when I was a kid. And I still like shooters occasionally for fun. I mostly play FIFA soccer. Honestly, I love playing soccer on the PlayStation. But The Last of Us was created by an amazing, small but highly successful studio called Naughty Dog, and they produced a trilogy. I guess it's now 4 because they have one for the PS4, which I don't have, called Uncharted, which is basically you playing Indiana Jones, but for adults, and a combination of adventure and action and third-person shooting, but also puzzles and amazing dialogue and characters. I mean, like the best writing, like the adventure drama stuff. And these Uncharted, I was gonna say movies, they are games. You could really string it together as like a short movie, and it would be really fascinating. The character relationships, the voice actors are spectacular. There's talk of an Uncharted movie forever, but while they were making, I think, the second or before the third, they came up with The Last of Us, which on the surface is like, the typical kind of zombie story, right? Like The Walking Dead, or 28 Days Later, or I Am Legend, or so forth. But because of the performance, and they did motion capture of the lead 2 characters, Troy Baker as Joel, who's the guy you play most of the time, and Ashley Johnson, who's actually in her late 20s, playing the little girl's voice, Ellie. Ashley Johnson's awesome. I mean, she's been in a million things. She's done voice, she's done real. She was the waitress in the first Avengers movie, who actually had a more significant part. They decided to cut it out. Who said, Captain America saved me. But you would definitely recognize her. But those two voice work and relationship with one another really overshadows what I consider to be not amazing gameplay, even though I'm in the minority with this. But I don't even care. In fact, I haven't watched it all because I can't justify it because I've done it. But the video of all of the what they call cutscenes, all the dialogue bits that's not action and upgrading your weapons and the video game stuff, just the drama stuff, has been strung together by numerous people and has like millions of hits online. Like you can watch it. It's like 2.5 hours. It's really amazing. It was announced in December 2011, was widely anticipated, acclaimed by many, if not all, reviewers. And specifically praising its characterization, the subtext of the whole thing, which wasn't just about zombies, and exploration of the human psychological condition, depiction of female characters, another big step forward. This game, which is a little weird, and you have to be into story, which, the deathmatch degeneration or culture does not generally care about story. It sold 1.3 million units in the first week, and 8 million units within a year, which is extremely good for a game not called Grand Theft Auto. Considered one of the greatest video games of all time, but really ends up being one of the more subtle and interesting sort of zombie scenarios in the future. And part of that's because not everyone's zombies. There's just a lot of bad humans as well as zombie creatures. And, like with all good or great zombie properties, they find out, where the fungus or the virus or whatever came from. But it's not unrelated to Children of Men. So without total spoilering where this is going with these two characters and a young girl who's more than she seems, is very Children of Men, and a great game and a great story. And finally, and I'm going to sign off without much ado. Okay, I had a bit of a digital hiccup there. I thought I lost the entire 45 minutes, so let's get to the finale. But first, after setting up the science fiction Kevin Bacon game the entire time, I missed my glorious moment in the sun and why I put the movie Contact at the #1 position. You might remember I talked about Ms. Jenna Malone being awesome as Donnie Darko's girlfriend. And despite the end of the world, we get one of the most passionate teenage kisses even though they're probably 18 or 19, in the history of television. Why am I bringing up Jenna Malone? Well, you remember Jodie Foster playing the nerdy but sexy Ellie Arroway in Contact? Well, guess who played the young Ellie Arroway in Contact? That's right, the one, the only, Jenna Malone. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I recognized her immediately. I couldn't put it together. I was thinking in my head that it looked like Jenna Malone. And she's so effective and so talented as like a 12 or 13-year-old. Back in 97 or 96 when they made Contact, they have at least 3 flashback scenes with her and her father, David Morse, who, spoiler alert, dies relatively young from a heart condition and really informs her entire, past, present, and future as a character. Jodie Foster, they sell it through Jenna Malone, super talented as a child actress, now is in Hunger Games, Into the Wild, often confused with Kristen Stewart, both very good actresses. I prefer Jenna Malone. She's just one of those sort of under-the-radar actresses that gets big parts like Hunger Games, but also in indie movies, so God bless. There you go, end of the Kevin Bacon Sci-Fi game. So we finish with the final number 12, or number 1, I should say, of 12 non-traditional properties, which is, and I make no apologies, the Animatrix. Yes, we're back to the Matrix, but this I bet you have not heard about for the most part. And if you've heard about it, you love it. Now, the reality is, as much as I personally love Matrix Reloaded for philosophical reasons and some of the big fights, this is the coolest Matrix property outside of the original movie. It was straight to DVD and digital back in 2003. People praying before the end of the world. And they released it between Reloaded and Revolutions. And in fact, watching that made me like and go back to Reloaded numerous times and like it a lot more because it set up all sorts of interesting philosophical stuff. So really quickly, it's basically divided into 9 chapters, animated and directed and written almost completely by Japanese folks, even though we listened to it with American actors speaking English. It was all done by Japanese. Came together when the Wachowskis were promoting The Matrix in Japan, which they loved in Japan because they stole almost all the ideas from Japanese anime and manga and so forth. And, the Japanese immediately wanted to work with the Wachowskis, and the Wachowskis wrote some outlines for some of the 9 chapters, but basically let the Japanese go to town. It's divided into 3 kinds of not equal number. The first is the first episode, called The Final Flight of the Osiris. And if you've seen The Matrix Reloaded, this is a direct reference to the beginning of the movie where all the captains are assembling, and Jada Pinkett Smith says we received a final transmission from the Osiris, which was destroyed, which says there are 250,000 Sentinels coming towards Zion, which is way bigger of a force, way sooner and way quicker than they had expected. And this is the final flight. It starts with a virtual reality fight between the captain and the first mate, who are love interests. I won't go into it. It's the only one that's 3D animated. The other 8 episodes are all traditional 2D style Japanese animation. That's type 1. Type 2 is episodes 2 and 3 are the second Renaissance 1 and 2, which are narrated by a sort of semi-robotic female voice about how the end of the world came to be. And it began when the humans enslaved robots, and they were so rich and apathetic that, they just turned to robots to take care of all of their work and didn't think that, the robots and AIs could develop to the point where they defend themselves until B166ER. Yep, that is a robot not only rebelling against his master, but smushing his face and exploding it, which is actually referenced in Orphan Black when Helena mimics doing this a number of times. I think maybe she goes through with it once. And the whole idea is rising up against the master. Now you think, where did they get B166ER? Well, if you've read Native Son by Richard Wright, Bigger Thomas is the black servant, I believe in Chicago, who accidentally kills the daughter of his, employer slash master when she's drunk, trying to quiet her so that he doesn't get in trouble and strangles her or asphyxiates her by accident. That's the whole book, is him being on the run and, is he guilty? And, where do we draw the line of guilt in situations of such uneven balances of power? And that's reflected in the Robots Uprising. The humans, not surprisingly, turn to genocide, and there's some very disturbing scenes where robots are in human skin are sexually assaulted. It's hard to get this from a single image, but this guy does blow this robot away in the face, and there's huge, giant mass graves, just like the Holocaust. It's not a coincidence. The Wachowskis are Jewish, I believe. Even if they're not, it's clear Holocaust imagery that they basically try and commit the genocide of the robot race. And now they resettle in the Middle East, unsurprisingly, and then create a giant economy for themselves, try and be friends with the humans. The humans continue to be threatened by the robots, unite, try and attack the robots, and of course the robots, being smarter, more powerful, and more efficient, bring the angels and forces of death, look at that image, against humanity. And it results in horrifying images like this. And this might as well be from Ghost in the Shell. Definitely a tribute, to say the least. They say your bodies are a relic, essentially. In the new world, you're going to be batteries to power us. So that's the second kind. The third kind is the final 6 of 9 episodes, which are little vignettes, which are all very powerful and dark and interesting and in their own way, animated totally differently. I'd say, half of the 6 are really good. The other 3 are okay, have some cool parts. Among my favorite is, this is probably my favorite, that's not the second Renaissance history of the Matrix, called World Record, where a runner who's very much based on like Usain Bolt or Ben Johnson or someone like this, but he's not actually juicing, is able to feel the boundaries of the Matrix and exceed them and break those rules the way Neo does, but not for philosophical reasons like Neo, but purely physical reasons. But it's still a threat to the Matrix because he's moving faster than any human can, and ultimately they cause his body to be completely crippled and him to go into, an insane asylum because he had seen the numbers in the Matrix code and had no idea what to make of it because he didn't have the hacker knowledge or intelligence of Neo. Just really coolly animated. There's Beyond, where an average girl, who's sort of there to the, left of your screen, right there, is looking for her cat named Yukio and stumbles on a place where the rules don't apply, and she finds some weird punk kids, jumping from great heights and floating and soaring and not, obeying the rules of gravity, and she, again, like in the one about the racer, is just a step away from realizing there's something else. In fact, she does open a door at one point that opens into infinite blackness in what I always refer to as the Hall of Worlds, which is a fantasy concept, actually, where you're basically able to step into an infinite number of universes. She gets to taste that. Ultimately, the agents come, shut the whole place down, and it ends in a very sad way, where she's just staring at what might have been in the magic. Sorry, World Record is the name of the one with the racer. And then they just have some cool fucking Japanese animation where the story's not particularly interesting, and it's just a simulator where they're fighting against each other, but it's really cool nod to old school, Japanese art and animation going back hundreds of years, if not more so. And really the final episode, which is what made Reloaded in retrospect so cool and also made Revolution so disappointing, was called Matriculated, where they actually capture a Sentinel bot and they plug it into a Matrix construct that they've made, and they teach it love through a series of labyrinths and riddles and mazes and tests and challenges. It actually does learn to love to the point where the red light turns green to signal going from bad guy to good. It's too late. It's already signaled its buddies. All the humans who are working on this project along the surface are wiped out, including this woman who the robot has fallen in love with. And although she's almost dead, the robot plugs himself in, and he basically tries to digitally rape her, and she is so horrified that her mind disintegrates, and the final image is of the cartoon, I wanted to say, of the episode in which ends the Animatrix, is the robot and her both plugged in with their heads down, her because she's dead, him because he's despondent. And it's really teasing the sort of fine line between humans and machine, where machines want to be humans and can even act and behave like humans, and humans who are like Neo, who behave like machines. And they do address this in Revolution. So when you get over the bombastic bullshit of that movie with Satine, they do talk about it, not to the extent that I wanted to. So that's it for the BizzleCast, top 12 sci-fi properties that I haven't properly talked about yet. Don't know when my next vlog will be. Definitely this is going to be the longest one for a while, but I wanted to sort of set the stage. I'm going to try and keep it 6 to 10 minutes so I can post it on Facebook, put subtitles on, and so forth. Thank you so much for listening, and the Bizzle is out.